Everybody, this is Dream, and tomorrow we have a 4-game slate for hockey. These games start at 7 o'clock here on FanDuel. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? If you like the hockey content, let me know so I'll keep doing it. I'm probably not going to do it every day, but I'm going to try to do it, when I have extra time. So with that said, let's get into the slate itself. Um, so let's start with goalies today. Now, you do need to confirm that these guys are going to start whoever you choose to be your goalie. And you got to make sure to check that before the slate locks, because a lot of times the goalies change near closer to lock, because nobody's completely certain who's going to be the starter. So just make sure to check those things, because I've seen people get burned a couple times lately with that. So just keep that in mind. With that said, let's get into the goalies here. And these are the guys that it looks like they're going to start, and so you just have to bear with that because you're going to have to check. Marc-Andre Fleury, he's averaging about 16 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling is in the 40s. He's been pretty good so far this season. He's had a couple of bad games, but overall he's been pretty solid. So I expect him to be out there and have a really good shot in this particular matchup against Seattle. Then we're going to look at Darcy Krimper. Now, I've actually used him a couple times recently. Sorry if I butcher all these names, by the way. He's pretty solid. He's averaging 20 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling is the highest of the goalies that I have, which is around 40 to 45 points. As you can see, he's had some big games this season. He's been a little bit more inconsistent recently, but I expect him to bounce back here and get a win. Then we're going to look at Andre Vasilevskiy for Tampa Bay. Now, he is an interesting spot here, and he's averaging 19 fantasy points a game, including a ceiling of about 44, and so I do like him here. Now, he's been somewhat inconsistent as well, but, we're just looking for quality wins and stuff like that here. And then Scott Wedgwood for Dallas. Now, he's not played as many games, but he's had some good games recently. He's averaging 16 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling's in the 30s. He's a little bit lower. He's kind of a secondary option, or if you really want to have a alternate way to try to sneak through to especially in a GPP scenario, then he might be somebody you want to take a look at. For centers, we're going to start off with let's see here. Hang on one second. Austin Matthews here for Toronto. He's in a pretty good spot here, averaging let's see here, 23 fantasy points a game, including a ceiling of 46. He's the highest of all the centers on the slate, and so I really do like what he's been doing, and he's a pretty decent price in this one. Then we're gonna look at Sidney Crosby. Now Sidney Crosby is obviously averaging 17 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling's in the mid 40s, and he's a little bit cheaper than Matthews, so you may decide to come down to him a little bit. Then we're gonna look at let's see here, Evgeny Kustnov. Sorry, again, I don't know. I'm not good at Russian guys' names. I think he's Russian at least. Anyhow, he is $6,100. He's a little bit cheaper, but he's averaging about 13 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling's in the mid 30s. He's been pretty consistent so far this season, so I do like him here in this particular matchup. And then we're going to look at Thomas Hurd for sorry, Hurdy. I don't know why I say Hurd. San Jose. Now he's averaging about 13 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling's in the 30s. I expect him to have a pretty good game here. He's been playing pretty well recently. Then we're going to look at Logan Couture for San Jose. Now he is on the second line, and he's averaging 12 fantasy points a game with a ceiling of around 30. He's actually been pretty good lately, pretty consistent with him having close to 20 minutes, and he's a good secondary option if you need that, and a cheaper option at this particular position. Then we're going to look into the wings, and we're going to start off with Nikita Kucherov. Again, I don't know how to say your guys' names, so I apologize. He's obviously one of the most expensive guys on the slate. He's averaging about 19 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling is in the mid 40s. You can see he's had some really big games this season, and he's been extremely consistent too, which I really like. He's only had one game below 10 fantasy points, so he's a top tier play on the slate overall. Then we're going to look at Jake, uh, Gutenal, or Gutens, I don't know how to say it. Anyhow, I'm just gonna butcher all the names, but you can see it on the screen here. So, he's averaging 18 fantasy points a game with a ceiling of around 40. Now he hasn't really had one of those extremely massive games, but he's been really consistent the last 6 games or so, and I look for him to be a good option on this one. Then we're gonna look at Timo Meyer here for San Jose. He's averaging 17 fantasy points a game, and he's got a ceiling, one of the higher ceilings of a 51. He's had some really solid games lately. As you can see, he's been extremely good the last 6 or 7 games. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, actually, yeah, 7 games. I look for him to continue that in this nice matchup. Then we're going to look at Ovechkin. Let's see here, Ovechkin here for Washington. He's in a good spot. He's been pretty consistent, as you can see as well. He's averaging 18 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling is about 40. He did have one bad game last time, but I expect him to bounce back and do well here. And then we're going to look at Mitchell Marner. Oops, Marner. He is a little bit cheaper. One of the cheaper options here. He is averaging 18 fantasy points a game, and he has got one of the higher ceilings with around 53. As you can see, he hasn't had one of those gigantic games, but he's been pretty solid. He's only had a couple lower scoring games, and he's a really good value, so I really like him on this one. And then Brian Rust, he's a cheap option that is averaging about 14 fantasy points a game, and he's got a ceiling up to around 40. He's been a little bit inconsistent lately, but he does have some upside in this matchup, so I do like him as well. Then we're going to look at the defensive players, and I've got 4 guys here for you. Erik Karlsson is the first one for San Jose. He's averaging 14 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling's around 40. He's got the highest ceiling of the defensive players that I like. Then we're going to look at Morgan Riley here for Toronto. Now he's a little bit, the rest of the guys a little bit cheaper, and he's $5,600. He's actually been pretty good lately. He's had a couple off games, but he's averaging about 13 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling is up in the mid-30s. So I think he has some opportunity in this one. And then Chris Letang for Pittsburgh. He is got a 14 fantasy point average, and he's got a ceiling close to 25 to 30, a little bit lower. But again, a lot of times I try to pay down at this position so that I can pay up at another one. And then finally, the cheapest guy on the slate, I think, Vince Dunn for Seattle. He is a first-line player, and he plays 20 to 25 minutes here. He's been inconsistent all season, but he does have some upside. He's averaging about 10 fantasy points a game, and his ceiling about 21. He's just a really good value play if you desperately need to save extra money to put in there. So with that said, guys, that's what I have for hockey. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing, and have a nice day.